2022 was absolutely mental. So mental, I wanted to wait until 2023 was here to make this video, just to make sure that 2022 was actually done being 2022. Back to January of last year, and proceedings got off to a crazy start at the Day 1 Premium Live event after Roman Reigns contracted COVID hours before the show was due to begin. It was supposed to be Roman versus Brock Lesnar for the Tribal Chiefs Universal title, but then that was changed to this massive five-way on the fly where Brock ended Big E's first WWE title reign in a match that wasn't even happening hours before the event was due to start. New Japan had a three-night Wrestle Kingdom event, which seems crazy given the couple of years they had before 2022 even started, and the final night of that show wasn't even at the Tokyo Dome, instead taking place at the Yokohama Arena on January the 8th, where it was co-promoted with Noah, who clearly said yes sir on this occasion. January also saw Cody Rhodes prove he is nothing more than an iceberg, and that we can see him above the water, but there was a whole other massive situation underneath the surface. He cut a promo on January the 19th where he claimed, and I quote, "Someone told me to save this promo, but I honestly don't know if I'll get the chance, so I'm going to do it now." Cody made references to CM Punk's pipe bomb, clearly hinting that he thought this was his own bomb made of pipes. Cody said he was the guy who built the Forbidden Door in Punk's absence from the business, and then 1 week later he would lose what would turn out to be his final AEW match in a TNT title unification ladder thing against Sammy Guevara. Meh, business as usual? Nah, not a chance. Fightful report that AEW EVP, remember Cody Rhodes, had been a free agent since the arse end of 2021 and working without a contract at the start of 2022. It's absolutely crazy goings on, with Cody basically telling us he wouldn't be around in AEW for long on their show without explicitly saying he wouldn't be on their show for much longer. During that promo I mentioned just a second ago, Cody got a sweat on. He was that passionate about what he was saying, which leads us nicely to Shane McMahon's Royal Rumble appearance that left Randy Orton pissing his pants on the floor in a fit of laughter. Apparently Shane McMahon was supposed to enter the 2022 Men's Rumble at the number 29 position, but his music started playing in the number 28 slot, which was supposed to be Randy Orton's. Orton said, "Well Shane, I'm not going out there and dancing like a dick. Get on out there son and make an impact." Knockouts champion Mickie James smashed down the forbidden window will go a window in the Women's Rumble match, appearing on a WWE PLE with her Impact title and her Impact music. Hardcore country indeed. Back to Shane though at this Rumble PLE, and the story goes that most of his ideas for the match were rejected by Vince McMahon, while Shane was openly burying people like producer Jamie Noble. "I must be the best wrestler," he said. "Jamie Noble is an arsehole," probably something like that. Off the back of this, Shane was fired by WWE at the start of February and hasn't been back to the company since. Right. Germany is a country, as we all know, which leads us to the apparent origin story of Walter being renamed Gunther. Remember how angry we all were? Well, a large part of that had to do with reports suggesting that WWE wanted to call Gunther Stark initially, as around this time they abandoned a trademark application for that name, I should say. Just in case you don't know, Gunther Stark is the name of a Nazi U-boat commander, and because NXT 2.0 was fantastically weird at times, a gimmick along those lines for that Austrian man seemed a real possibility. Honestly. Now, Gunther Stark was the commander of a boat that was sunk on the English Channel back in 1944, which coincidentally was the same year that Mustafa Ali first requested his release from WWE. He did so again last January, saying he had a message that is much bigger than his dreams in pro wrestling, and those dreams could not be fulfilled while working in WWE. However, WWE again said no and didn't use him again on TV until April, and still haven't really used him to full effect as I'm sat here recording this video in January of 2023. It's bizarre, but not as bizarre as MLW filing an antitrust lawsuit against the WWE last January, but WWE, this is the bizarre part by the way, said MLW failed to provide any evidence that they, WWE, had monopoly power over professional wrestling, and I'm containing a laugh, and that's all I'm willing to say on the matter because of legal stuff that I'm terrified of. January continued with the news that William Regal and Samoa Joe so were the headline names released from WWE. Yes, we still had those massive mass releases in 2022. Regal had been with the company since 2000. That's a bloody long time. And we round off the insanity from January 2022 with Jackass star Wee Man being put through a table by Brock Lesnar, shootly, I should say, at a restaurant. That really happened. At the start of February, and we learned that Brian Kendrick is not a man with a plan at all. After being granted his release from WWE, Kendrick was scheduled to make his AEW debut against Jon Moxley on Dynamite, but he went and opened his mouth about several conspiracy theories, and unsurprisingly, Tony Khan hasn't invited him back since. Ronda Rousey, however, enlisted the help of Brian to piece together her Survivor Series Thunder Bastard, that's what we'll call that match, against Shotzi, and given how that match went down, I bet Ronda was thinking, I wish I never bothered Brian. Dave Meltzer started reporting that Cody Rhodes was the talk of WWE last February, and those in power positions in the company believed they had a good chance of signing the former TNT champion. People around the world who weren't in the company, they laughed at Dave Meltzer for those reports. Later that day, when the initial report came out, I should say, Cody and Brandi issued a joint statement announcing their exits from AEW, and it very quickly emerged that Cody was expected to re-sign with WWE, and we didn't know what the hell to do with ourselves. This founding father of AEW, this fella who told us endless times about a revolution in wrestling, and that revolution being AEW, back in WWE. It's still weird to think about even now. Back to February though, and Keith Bloody Lee, released by WWE in November of 2021, he made his AEW debut by defeating Isaiah Cassidy to qualify for a ladder match where the goal was to reach for a brass ring. How fitting, eh? Indubitably, as I simply cannot say. And speaking of brass rings, the fella who brought about Vince McMahon using that phrase in front of the watching masses in the middle of the last decade left WWE after 11 years of service. Cesaro, that was his name, reportedly I should say, turned down a new deal and quietly exited the company, last wrestling for WWE on the 11th of February in a defeat to Baron Corbin. Oh, what could have been. March was an awful month. It saw the untimely passing of Scott Hall at the age of 63, while Triple H confirmed the game was over as he announced his retirement from the ring following a cardiac event caused by a genetic heart issue that happened in 2021, as well as viral pneumonia and inflamed lungs. And then we move on to Tony Khan, by the way, who acquired the extensive video library, brand assets, intellectual property, production equipment, and more of Ring of Honor Wrestling Entertainment LLC from Sinclair Broadcast Group out of absolutely nowhere, announcing he had done so mere days before last year's Revolution pay-per-view, an event, by the way, that saw Ring of Honor CM Punk regenerated to defeat MJF in a dog collar match. And speaking of MJF, I bet Tony Khan wishes he had a dog lead for him, because MJF did an interview with Ariel Helwani in March that wasn't approved by Khan, and both men settled their differences backstage, and we never heard anything about this ever again. Until April. Sorry for laughing, but it is funny how things turned out, isn't it? Things Khan did approve of were the shocking AEW debuts of Jeff Hardy, William Regal, Swerve Strickland and Tony Storm in March, so that's some scrubby news indeed. Over to WWE, and unfortunately March was also the month that saw Big E break his neck on SmackDown, and we're still not sure if he'll wrestle again here today. He's going to have scans this coming March, that will tell us more. And finally for March, one-time WWE superstar Cain Velasquez was charged with murder, but would wrestle for AAA in December, with more wrestling to come for the Lucha Libre promotion in 2023, according to reports. FTR and the Briscoes put on a match of the year contender at the first Ring of Honor pay-per-view of the TK era, as Dax and Cash became AAA and Ring of Honor tag team champions at the same time. They had quite a year at FTR. After adding the IWGP tag team titles to their collection, they would have to wait from April until December to challenge for the AEW tag team titles, even though they were number one contenders, I should say. It's shocking to say, I can't even get the sentence out. Finally, when they actually managed to do so, they lost to the Acclaimed on Dynamite, not even a pay-per-view, in a match that was used to advertise the barn burner of a double dog collar match against the Briscoes once more at the Final Battle pay-per-view. And speaking of waiting for something, Ring of Honor fans waited over 7 years to see Samoa Joe wrestle in one of their rings, but that's what he did in April, as he also made himself All Elite, even though Joe had only rejoined WWE in June of 2021 after initially being released by them in April of 2021. What a timeline of events that is. WrestleMania also happened in April, and whoa boy, where do we start with this one? It's the event that saw Johnny Knoxville have a match of the year contender in a bout that saw Sami Zayn haluva kick Wee Man into oblivion, get slammed by Wee Man like Wee Man is Hogan and Sami Zayn is Andre the Giant, before Sami was pinned by a human-sized mousetrap. Vince McMahon wrestled and defeated Pat McAfee after Pat had seen off Austin Theory, the next big thing apparently. Vince also proved that he still can't sell a Stone Cold Stunner, and Cody Bastard Rhodes, he was the one who answered Seth Rollins' challenge and returned to WWE with everything that made him AEW's Cody Rhodes, theme and all. And that was after 6 years away, of course. And Stone Cold Steve Austin, we've got to mention him. He wrestled his first match since WrestleMania 19 against Kevin Owens after a KO show segment turned into a knockout of a match. 57-year-old hadn't wrestled in 19 years, remember, Stone Cold Steve Austin. He took a suplex on the arena floor made of concrete. He gave 2 suplexes on the really hard stage and then wrestled a match that showed he just really hasn't lost a step. Oh, and YouTube twat Logan Paul made his in-ring debut for the WWE on this card as well, and he proved he's an absolute natural at professional wrestling, which is sickening. Elsewhere, Nash Carter got himself released from WWE after a picture came to light that I can't really discuss, otherwise the voice censor things that YouTube employs will demonetize this video with no second thought given. Elias's twin brother, Ezekiel, who looked like Elias but without the beard and any character or charisma whatsoever. He made his WWE debut. Remember this one? Remember how bad this one was? It was so bad that Elias would return in October after that Zeke gimmick that reeked of leak. That's how smelly it was. It was canned in August. MJF became Rachel from Friends at the start of May. Did he get off the plane? Did he even get on a plane? I don't think anyone apart from the man himself is sure, as the current AEW champion no-showed a meet and greet before maybe getting on a plane that would have meant he no-showed his big Double or Nothing match against Wardlow. MJF did appear at Double or Nothing, of course, and lost conclusively, which, by the way, I think was where the story with Wardlow was going before this entire thing, it kicked off. All of this happened before MJF appeared on the next Dynamite to call Tony Khan an effing mark in a shoot that turned into a work, brothers. MJF wouldn't be seen again on AEW TV until All Out, when he was revealed to be the Joker who won the Casino Ladder match, and that of course happened in September. The mention of Double or Nothing means we have to mention Dr. Martha Hart appearing on a wrestling show as part of the Owen Hart Memorial Tournament. Imagine saying that would happen at any point since the turn of the century, for goodness sake. That same show, of course, saw CM Punk cap a dream first 9 months in AEW by defeating Hangman Page to win the AEW World title. It's weird to think that was earlier in 2022, right? And it's fitting that we mentioned Punk in May, as this was the month dominated by people just not getting along with others. Roddy Strong tried to get out of WWE, but they said no, and now he's not been seen for ages. If you've seen Roddy, let me know. Tessa Blanchard fell out with the promotion that was seemingly designed to rehab her public image before seemingly completely killing her own professional wrestling career. Where she is, I've got no idea. And Alexa Bliss revealed that her and her husband have been dealing with a stalker in real life. Kota Ibushi also aired his grievances with New Japan management in a series of tweets that even brought up the Yakuza. And then we have Sasha Banks and Naomi, as the pair said enough is enough and it's time for a change, as they walked out on WWE. I mean, we could all see why they did what they did with the state of the women's tag team titles at the time. WWE back then had announced that Banks and Naomi would be in action in a six-pack challenge main event to crown the #1 contender for the Raw women's title. Naomi was reportedly booked to win that match and then go on to challenge Bianca Belair for the gold at Hell in a Cell, a match that Naomi would of course have lost because Bianca Belair was getting a big push at the time. She still is, of course. Banks would have entered her own singles feud at Hell in a Cell with SmackDown Women's Champion Ronda Rousey, and because of those plans, Banks and Naomi had a meeting with Vince McMahon and voiced their unhappiness at the women's tag team division being de-emphasized once more over the coming weeks. After walking out, the pair were stripped of their tag team titles, with Vince McMahon later having Michael Cole look down the camera lens on SmackDown to tell the watching world the pair had let everybody down. May was also the month that Stephanie McMahon announced that she was taking a leave of absence from WWE to focus on her family. Upon doing so, a story from Business Insider revealed that her performance might have had something to do with it as well. We weren't seeing that growth, a source told them, which is weird because after being slagged off, Steph was back as the chairwoman of the company following her dad's retirement. This timeline makes as much sense as the Authors of Pain and their wrestling entertainment series, which was also announced in May. Akam and Reza were off their rockers when they announced that the show was set to take place in a 10,000 capacity arena in Nottingham, England. The show was going to have a myriad of former WWE talent on the card, with the main event pitting Braun Strowman against Alistair Overeem, an MMA man who labelled pro wrestling fake and lame, and it's not even a sport. What are you doing here then, pal? What are you even doing is what the entire UK were saying when the former AOP organised this event for the same weekend as the Platty Jubes, which is the fancy way of saying Platinum Jubilee, ma'am. Imagine not knowing the Queen of England's 70 years on the throne 4-day bank holiday weekend party was taking place that same weekend. Chelsea Green, one of the talent and not one of the bookers of the event, said the initial date was called off on Twitter, and it took 12 hours for WES themselves to confirm the news to her. A new date was set for just over a month later, and due to prior commitments, some of the American talent like Adam Scherr, CJ Perry and Nia Jax couldn't make it. But this didn't stop WES from promoting them like they were going to be there, even though they knew they weren't going to be. Matt Raywald even took to social media to announce that he didn't have any travel or accommodation plans mere days before the second proposed event was due to take place. And then Adam Callier of the Daily Star noted that the event had sold less than 350 tickets in that fabled 10,000 seat arena, an arena, by the way, that not even WWE can sell out when they come to town for their live events. It was only then that WES confirmed that CJ Perry versus Lena Fernene was off the card, even though the entire world already knew that because the pair had taken to Twitter to say some things. Finally, WES confirmed the second show was off and had the cheek, I can't believe I'm reading this again, had the cheek to put the blame on the talent who found out the show was off at the same time as the fans once again via Twitter. The Authors of Pain need to stick to books instead of booking. I'm sure you will agree. June kicked off with the fallout from Double or Nothing. MJF cut a work-shoot promo about a work that turned into a shoot that saw him label, as I mentioned earlier, Tony Khan an effing mark while he demanded he be fired from AEW. MJF would then be missing from the company, the television and social media, everything basically, until All Out in September. Remember when MJF and Punk gave us a feud for the ages? It seems so long ago, doesn't it? Well, we mentioned Maxwell, so we might as well mention Philip, as he broke his foot in the midst of doing a stage dive less than a week after capturing the AEW World title. A whole mess would come from this, so basically, don't do stage dives, kids. Injuries were the flavour of the month for May. Mayday, Mayday, the injured wrestlers were probably saying to each other, because this was a painful month for them. Cody Rhodes tore the peck off the bone, or his peck off his pec bone. Yes, that's how doctors speak, isn't it? Before wrestling a lovely Hell in a Cell match against Seth Rollins at the start of June. Given everything else that happened last year, we don't speak about this match enough, in my opinion. Some of the things Cody took and did in that match, he must have been on more painkillers than the entire 1980s. AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling tried to cobble together a card for the Forbidden Door pay-per-view, which was announced back in April, but injuries due to the likes of CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish really should have hampered the show, but it really didn't. It was my show of the year for 2022. But it wasn't without incident, as Adam Cole suffered a concussion in the four-way semi-main, and as of me sitting here in January of 2023, he just returned last night on AEW TV. That same Forbidden Door saw Claudio Castagnoli make his AEW debut as a surprise opponent for Zack Sabre Jr., a match that Bryan Danielson was supposed to have. What a bloody weird sentence that is to say, eh? And I don't fight jobbers. Not my words, but the words of Chris Jericho towards MVP in a hotel in Houston this past June. Apparently, MVP was talking to Matt Hardy because AEW were in town and MVP lives there. Apparently, this skirmish had something to do with, and I quote, social and political issues, and MVP offered Chris Jericho to talk things over outside. And that's where the former AEW champ said, "I don't fight jobbers," before getting into a lift. Some sad news from June, as it was also the month that saw Jeff Hardy arrested for DUI, bringing an end to a hellacious 3-month run in AEW, while we'd also lose both Dave Hebner and Timmy White. But we round off June's happenings with the biggest story of the month, the biggest story of the year, and perhaps the biggest story relating to the weird-ass world of professional wrestling ever. The Wall Street Journal broke the news that Vince McMahon was the subject of an internal WWE investigation amid a $3 million hush money settlement for sexual misconduct. McMahon agreed to make the payment in January of 2022 in exchange for an NDA being signed. Amid the damning accusations, WWE reportedly increased the salary of a former paralegal whom McMahon allegedly had an affair with. Anonymous emails to WWE claimed the woman's salary doubled after she started the relationship with McMahon, and McMahon also allegedly, and I quote, gave her like a toy to WWE Head of Talent Relations John Laurinaitis. June the 17th saw Vince McMahon step down from his position as WWE Chairman and CEO. In his place, McMahon installed his daughter Stephanie just 1 month after she announced she was taking a leave of absence from the company to focus on her family, while also being lambasted, as I said earlier, for her performance by sources within the company. It's just weird that she would be picked of all people when those around her clearly didn't have faith in her, don't you think? But on that same day, June the 17th, 2022, Vince McMahon appeared on SmackDown to emphasize sticking together, while also figuratively sticking 2 fingers up to the entire world. Before coming through the curtain that night, Vince reportedly shouted, "F them," which tells you everything you need to know about his feelings on the situation. Vince would make another completely pointless appearance on the June 20th episode of Monday Night Raw, and the internal investigation has since been disbanded, but would continue into July. Some more on that now. On the 8th of July, a follow-up report from the Wall Street Journal revealed that McMahon had paid upwards of $12 million in NDA settlements to former WWE contractors and personnel. Additional settlements range from $1 million to $7.5 million in alleged hush money. Accusations against McMahon included sending nude photos and coercing a former wrestler to perform oral sex, only to fire this performer after she refused to have further sexual relations with him. A $1.5 million NDA against John Laurinaitis also came to light at this time, which was agreed in 2012 after an employee accused him of misconduct. And then on July the 22nd, 2022, roughly 8 minutes after the stock markets had closed for the weekend, Vince McMahon announced his retirement from WWE publicly after the decision had been reportedly made around a week earlier internally, as the company as a whole were fearful of any stock price implications. Ask anyone before that day, when will Vince retire? And to a person, they would have told you when he dies. But no, Vince McMahon made the announcement by simply tweeting, "At 77, time for me to retire. Thank you, WWE Universe. Then, now, forever together." At this time back in July, Stephanie McMahon, who was initially installed as WWE's interim chairwoman and CEO when the investigation first started, and Nick Khan, they are the co-CEOs. Triple H has replaced John Laurinaitis as WWE's Executive Vice President of Talent Relations, and Vince McMahon remains a majority shareholder but is officially retired from all duties, including creative. Get in there! Vince penned a fun email to the talent working for the company. OMG, is he really that old? Before Brock Lesnar heard the news, and this caused the Beast Incarnate to allegedly leave the July the 22nd episode of SmackDown in a bit of a strop before he did eventually come back to the building to fulfill his duties on air. Buff Bagwell now. He spent a large part of 2022 being what we thought was a wholesome man on Twitter. That was until fans were swindled out of their own money as they thought they were spending it on his merch, and it was revealed brace yourselves everybody, that a member of the Ohio Sex Offender Registry was running the Twitter account under a fake name. Buff really was the stuff, and I have had enough. Oh no, wait there! I've not had enough for July, because July 31, that was the date that saw Ric Flair wrestle his last match. The Nature Boy, who last wrestled before that, on September the 12th, 2011, for Impact Wrestling against Sting. He teamed with his son-in-law Andrade El Idolo to defeat the team of Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal. The build was funny. There was a fight in a car park with completely natural reactions from Ric Flair. Conrad and Jeff Jarrett did a podcast where they were treating this entire situation like it was a shooty shoot, but the match itself, I'm sure you will agree, this isn't just me speaking out of turn surely, was painful to watch. Flair, who noted he was happy with his performance, revealed he passed out twice during the match due to being dehydrated, and also appeared to fake a heart attack while his family watched in the front row. I saw great feedback from that. People dug it. Who are we? Especially me. It's his last match. He gets to pick, Conrad Thompson said, with a straight face about that heart attack spot, remember. I wish I hadn't said it was my last match. Flair has since said, and I think I speak on behalf of all compassionate human beings when I say, I hope it bloody was, Rick. Have a good sit down, will you? Claudio Castagnoli did eventually get a brass ring of sorts by capturing the Ring of Honor World title from Jonathan Gresham in the opening match of the Death Before Dishonor pay-per-view, in a bout that went just over 10 minutes long. This is weird to say, because Gresham had travelled the world building up stock not only in himself, but in the Ring of Honor title as well. So this loss, and the way it happened, and the heel turn out of nowhere just before the Death Before Dishonor event on AEW TV, was enough for him to have a shouty, sweary match with Tony Khan backstage, where he allegedly used his ranking in the PWI 500 as evidence that he should be booked better. July the 29th, 2022 saw New Japan establish their women's title, primarily using talent from Stardom and also some lass called Manny. And I guess this counts as insane when you look back at this first one, because this was the first comeback of the Triple H WWE regime, as Dakota Kai came back at SummerSlam 2022, forming Damage Control alongside Bayley and the newly named Io Sky. I'm sure none of us could have seen Triple H bringing back 18 more former WWE acts before the year was out. Mr. Blobby wrestled a match in August and we have no idea if he won or not. Look, there's footage, it's real, okay, but the fallout from the Vince McMahon saga continued into August, with PW Insider breaking the news that per WWE sources, John Laurinaitis had been officially quietly let go by the company after being removed from his position of Executive Vice President of Talent Relations. The Wall Street Journal were back again in August with a report confirming that $5 million in unrecorded expenses from Vince McMahon were indeed payments to the Donald Trump Foundation in 2007 and 2009, bringing the total in undeclared McMahon expenses to $19.6 million. The payments were ultimately linked to Trump's TV appearances, with a person who reviewed the former US president's contract for WrestleMania 23 telling the Wall Street Journal that Trump directed Vince McMahon to pay a $4 million appearance fee to the Trump Foundation. Trump then boasted following Mania that his appearance had been so successful that McMahon agreed to pay an extra $1 million. Vince McMahon's attorney Jerry McDevitt rejected that the $1 million was a bonus, instead stating that Trump received $100,000 for his 2009 Raw appearance, and that Vince McMahon and Linda McMahon donated $1 million to the Trump Foundation that year. We had more backstage drama in AEW before the main backstage drama of the year had even kicked off, as Sammy Guevara and Eddie Kingston were involved in a little kerfuffle. Eddie was suspended for allegedly swinging at Sammy with his fist, a suspension that we didn't even realise was happening until it was basically over, while Sammy put out statements addressing the issue, claiming that people tell him things they don't want said over the course of a feud, and because Eddie didn't say anything to him, Sammy didn't see any issue in cutting a promo where he called Eddie fat. Eddie didn't like this, Eddie didn't like that at all, and that's fair enough. It's not nice being called fat, I would know. AEW AEW held a talent meeting back in August, which a source told Cultaholic Wrestling directly saw Kenny Omega claim he would not have hired 8 out of 10 people in a room, a comment which generated a mixed reaction, surprisingly. Who would have thought of it? To make things worse, our source said that Omega then turned to Will Ospreay and said the New Japan star didn't even work in AEW, yet he could wrestle circles around everyone in the room. It's a good job that Omega, preaching to a certain choir of course, wasn't involved in any controversial goings-on backstage throughout the rest of the year. Jon Moxley and CM Punk's World Title Unification match was moved from All Out in September to the August the 24th episode of AEW Dynamite amidst talk that CM Punk was not going to show up for the August the 17th episode of Dynamite. Moxley won the match in very quick fashion after Punk re-injured his injured foot while pivoting, Ross Geller there, on it to deliver a kick in a match that nobody predicted would go down in the way that it did. August also saw WWE announce that NXT UK would be taking a brief hiatus, presumably in the same way Mufasa went on a brief hiatus after that bit with Scar and the Stampede in The Lion King. WWE then surprisingly revealed plans to launch NXT Europe in 2023 before releasing 23 members of the NXT UK roster. Bloody Brexit, eh? And I guess we should mention the tapping up scandal that was lost in 2022 Shuffle, where WWE allegedly reached out to the likes of FTR, Swerve Strickland, and an AEW name that had been with the company from the start. They would not accept WWE's advances, of course, but WWE wouldn't be too arsed about that because they also allegedly reached out to Malachi Black, Andrade El Idolo, and Buddy Matthews, as Triple H, surprisingly, thought he was Chelsea Football Club, and several WWE talent were now Ashley Cole back in 2005. Triple H was promoted to the position of Chief Content Officer in September in the latest bit of Vince McMahon stuff, and some of that content the game fronted up the production of saw WWE host their first stadium show in the UK since SummerSlam 1992 with Clash at the Castle in Cardiff, a show that went from the Sublime with Gunther versus Sheamus' classic and Dominic Mysterio hoofing his dad's pal in the nads before turning goth and getting a new mammy. It's a weird sentence to say, but it's all worked out very well, hasn't it? To the ridiculous scenes of Drew McIntyre failing to bring home the ooh-woo in his homeland-ish and instead singing American Pie and Don't Look Back in Anger with the fans. Over in AEW, producer Ace Steel was reportedly fined after dropping an F-bomb during his promo with CM Punk on the past Wednesday's episode of Dynamite. While trying to motivate his longtime friend, Steel uttered the curse word and then slapped Punk in the face. And that's the last we'll hear of those two before... Oh no, wait there. Did you realise that back in May that Hangman Adam Page really upset CM Punk with a line about workers' rights on AEW TV? No, neither did I. Punk was really upset by it, even though if he didn't say anything about it, nobody would have known anything about it, would they? They wouldn't have known. So upon his return from the foot injury that scuppered the summer of Punk on August the 18th, he went off the script. He called out Hangman Adam Page, and because Hangman wasn't scheduled to be involved in the segment, the hero couldn't do what the hero normally does, so he was made to look like a bit of a cowboy cook. I mention this as we set the table for All Out 2022, which took place in September. Here's what the All Out 2022 table looks like. We've got the Hangman promo at one end of the table, the Punk promo at the other end of the table, and in the middle, we've got some stupendous confectionaries from Mindy's Bakery right in the middle there. Aren't they bloody lovely? Look at them there. Can't even see the table. I've got no idea. Punk regained the AEW World title from Jon Moxley in what was allegedly the main event of the night. That was until Punk gave us the actual main event of the night when he came prepared with lots of things to say about Colt Cabana at the post-show press conference. He paid Colt's bills, didn't you know, during their dispute with WWE's Chris Amann. Punk stopped paying, Colt sued him back. The thing was dropped. I wish that was the end of it, but it's not. But something special was reserved for those effing children that couldn't run a Target that Punk works with, who coincidentally are also known as the EVPs of AEW, who had clearly been tickling Punk's anaconda. Vice, that was a link that didn't work at all. On top of that, we learned via Punk that Hangman Page is empty-headed for going into business for himself in the promo, that nobody realised Hangman actually went into business for himself in the first place, and also for some comments made in an interview where he basically said, I want a trial and everything, instead of looking or listening to those who came before me. I don't know what was going on. It didn't seem too bad from Hangman, but Punk took offence, didn't he? All this happened while AEW founder and the co-owner, Tony Khan. He sat there and didn't do anything to stop his wrestler from saying things one would assume Khan wouldn't want out there in the public domain. The only things to come out of Tony's mouth were air, because he breathes, and also some apologies to Punk and a question. Please, sir, can I have one of your fizzy cans of pop, please? Tony looked like the biggest mug I've seen since my mother went shopping at Sports Direct. If you know, you know. Then we get to the altercation in the locker room involving Punk and Ace Steel on one side and the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega on the other. Some said the Elite calmly walked into the locker room where Punk was getting changed. Others claimed the Bucks kicked down the locker room door and in the process hit poor Larry the dog in his little poor doggy face. Some others say that when the door was kicked down, the Bucks and Punk and Steel started having a tag team match of sorts, with Kenny Omega seeing sense and getting Larry the dog out of there. I'll be covering this thing over the next few months in this video right here, as this went on longer than 1987's Guinness World Record holding longest film ever, The Cure for Insomnia. Did Punk throw the first punch? I do not know. Numerous reports state a chair was thrown by Ace Steel, who also apparently bit Kenny Omega on the arm, who in turn allegedly must have had Steel in a headlock to get bitten on that particular part of the arm. Also, I read somewhere by some headlock expert. Whatever the weather, the bite mark could be clearly seen during Omega's time on Capcom TV, which was filmed roughly 1 week after the brawl for All Out occurred. How must MJF have been feeling in the days after All Out, the event, of course, where he made his big return, ironically, after his own big incident earlier in the year? Nobody was talking about that, though. Sympathy for the casino match winning Devil? I think not. On the Wednesday that followed the press conference from hell, both Young Bucks, Omega, Pat Buck, Christopher Daniels, Michael Nakazawa, and Brandon Cutler were all suspended by AEW pending an external third-party investigation. Punk, Steel, and Tony Khan went on Zoom to have a little chat. Punk had already gone home due to the injury sustained in that Moxley match at All Out, all while Bryan Danielson, I should say, Chris Jericho, and Jon Moxley themselves tried to rally the troops with another talent meeting, this time before the Dynamite that followed All Out. An episode of Dynamite that didn't include the Elite nor Punk in the title sequence, and where we immediately learned that the aforementioned men had been stripped of their AEW World and Trios titles respectively, with no reason given by Tony Khan on the air. Then, later that week, we learned that Ace Steel had been pulled off the road and CM Punk had been suspended by the company. Punk was then said to be buying out his contract, but that's still up in the air as of me sitting right here. Now this one is wild. EC3 accused the Velveteen Dream of secretly trying to film WWE talents as they used the bathroom during a house party that EC3 hosted. Dream then accused EC3 of doing cocaine and passing out in the corner and not being sure of Dream's sexuality because of his character on television, before EC3 then controlled some kind of narrative, I guess, by hoping that Velveteen Dream Patrick Clark finds the help that he needs. How nice, eh? What a situation that was. And also this month, WWE started playing White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane during commercial breaks at their televised shows and at live events too, and people thought it could have been Karrion Kross. Remember those days? Thankfully it wasn't though, but more on that in October. Elsewhere in September, Malachi Black appeared to confirm he had asked for his AEW release before saying that he didn't ask for his release and had just been given time off by Tony Khan to take care of a bunch of stuff in his private life, after threatening to come for as long as it takes to grow a human fetus. Veer Mahan was officially moved back to NXT, and Bobby Fish made a tit of himself during his debut month in Impact Wrestling. Where's the lie? So where's the lie? Where is the lie? I don't know. New Japan announced that Kushida had been diagnosed with hand, foot and mouth disease, and Jon Moxley once again became AEW World Champion after beating Bryan Danielson in a tournament final at AEW Dynamite Grand Slam in New York City, a setting that saw the Great Muta appear for AEW and embrace Sting at the Grand Slam Rampage taping, just because that could happen, and it did happen, and it was nice, wasn't it? And Saraya, she made her shock AEW debut. What a month that was, eh? Bray Wyatt returned to WWE after over a year away at the Extreme Rules Premium Live event. The show had looked to be going off the air after Matt Riddle's win over Seth Rollins in the Fight Pit, officiated by Daniel Cormier, by the way, but the lights went off. We saw the Firefly Funhouse puppets, but human-sized, and The Fiend, by the way, he was also there, and then Bray Wyatt walked through his own forbidden door, wearing a metal-looking mask belonging to a rubber-masked man that will come to be known as Uncle Howdy. More backstage Backstage fighting in AEW took over the airwaves in October when Sammy Guevara and Andrade El Idolo got into it after arguing on Twitter. Fightful Select and TMZ noted that Guevara pushed Andrade and El Idolo through a punch, while Dave Meltzer noted that a source he trusts completely told him Andrade was waiting in the hallway and got 2 punches in. The same report stated that Guevara did not fight back and the altercation was broken up right away. Andrade was ultimately sent home from the October 5th edition of Dynamite, while Sammy not only stayed on the show but got the pinfall win in the main event alongside Chris Jericho against Bryan Danielson and Daniel Garcia. A decision that apparently upset some people backstage and was the second time Sammy Guevara stayed on TV, while the other half of a disagreement backstage was sent home. The other one was Eddie Kingston in August, of course. This all happened during a period of time when Andrade was allegedly trying to get himself fired as he watched several former NXT standouts get re-signed by the WWE under the new Triple H regime. More gripe bomb news came out this month as the whole story about the Young Bucks barging into CM Punk's locker room in the process, having the door smash in poor little Larry the Dog's face, was said to be an outright lie. That's a direct quote from me there. Ace Steel was released by AEW after a period of suspension. We all know what he did in that post-gripe brom fracas. Steel had only joined AEW in February of 2022 after being released by WWE the month earlier. However, we did get some physicality in AEW that was very much welcomed as we saw Saraya exchanging punches with Britt Baker and super kicking Rebel on the October 5th episode of Dynamite, the first time Saraya had done anything like that since December of 2017. Following her signing with AEW, of course, reports were right that Saraya hadn't actually been cleared for a return to the ring, so this was, at the time, a bit of a shock. Carl Anderson's never openweight championship match against Hikuleo in Osaka at Battle Autumn was called off because of a double booking. The Machine Gun was due to take part in WWE Crown Jewel early in November. However, Anderson would eventually defend his title in December, meaning he went on to Wrestle Kingdom to face and lose to Tama Tonga while being contracted to WWE. Sad news in October came with the untimely passing of Tough Enough 2015 co-winner Sarah Lee at just 30 years of age, while New Japan founder Antonio Inoki passed away at the age of 79. Logan Paul took on Roman Reigns for the Woo at Crown Jewel in Saudi Arabia, during which he did the thing you can see on that little screen there. It makes you sick how good he is at the professional wrestling, doesn't it? Jeff the Bastard Jarrett, as I like to call him, made his AEW debut attacking Darby Allin with El Kabong on a show that also saw appearances, by the way, from Rick Ross and Mr. Shibata, who later lost to Orange Cassidy in a great little match with Mike Tyson on commentary. Yes, that is a thing that really happened last year. Later, Tony Khan revealed that Double J, back to him by the way, was not only signed on as the Director of Business Development for AEW, but he would make his pay-per-view debut for the company in a wonderfully silly tag match alongside his friend Jay Lethal against Darby and Sting. This capped off the year of Jarrett, this is insane, who also made appearances on screen for WWE while also being hired in their role as Senior Vice President of Live Events in May before leaving that role in August. He also appeared for AAA and GCW and a wonderful episode of Straight to Hell with me on this channel. Go and look at it after this video if you want. It's really good, if not a bit short, but that was because of time constraints. That's not my fault. Jeff Jarrett's a nice man. I like Jeff Jarrett. The Elite returned to in-ring action and remained EVPs of AEW despite everything that went on and most people telling you, saying you can't be an EVP and a talent at the same time. Kenny Omega confirmed the news that he was returning to New Japan Pro Wrestling to have a match for the first time since he dropped the IWGP Heavyweight title to Tanahashi at Wrestle Kingdom 13. William Regal did some things to help MJF capture the AEW World title from Jon Moxley at Full Gear, but more on that in December's rundown. And after everything that happened with CM Punk and the Elite, Colt Cabana wrestled his first proper AEW match since a March the 4th appearance on Dark when he challenged Chris Jericho for the Ring of Honor title as the Ocho was taking down every former Ring of Honor champion, even the tag ones, just to make the storyline kind of work. During the match, Colt later revealed that he was wearing some compression socks because somebody stole his normal ones, and that almost cut off the circulation to the rest of his body. What's he like, eh? Almost immediately after NWA boss Billy Corgan said, yeah, there's lots of good lady wrestlers, but can they do the NWA style and carry a pay-per-view? Tyrus won the men's world title and around about the same time as doing so, did a move off the middle rope with all the grace of a fridge filled with Tyrus's massive limp body. You can't make up that kind of comedy, can you, from Billy? What a bloody load of nonsense. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat wrestled his first match since 2010 when he teamed with FTR to defeat Brock Anderson, Jay Lethal, and Nick Aldis. Thankfully, that one was a lot more palatable, I should say, than Ric Flair's last match. And speaking of palatable, November saw us learn that Triple H bloody loves sausage, bean, and cheese melts from Greg's up here in the north of England. What a year it's been, and there's still a month to go. Keith Lee, you're a big mother. Mandy Rose abruptly dropped the NXT Women's title to Roxanne Perez after a 413-day reign before she was surprisingly fired for what WWE considered the explicit nature of the content on her fan time page. WWE thought the content was outside the parameters of her contract, so they felt they had to let her go. Mandy, though, she's landed on her feet, and good for her, because her manager claimed in the first few days after she left the company, she made over $500,000. And then by the time December wrapped up, she'd gone over the $1 million mark. And you know what? More power to her, especially in that kind of situation. And especially if the talk of WWE sources trying to leak the news of her asking for her release, somehow to muddy the waters of her actual release. If they're true, more power to her for making all that their cash money. Then we had Riddle initially written off television with a 6-week injury before he was actually sent to rehab, all while his personal life with not one but 2 adult film stars was displayed all over Twitter. In all seriousness, I hope he's doing well. Lacey Evans. She shared a clip of a conspiracy theory from some idiots on her Instagram stories, which featured 2 men casting doubt on autism and ADD diagnosis numbers and how developmental disabilities just didn't exist before. Upon seeing the backlash to that bollocks, Lacey claimed she just watched a video on the impact of processed food and what it's doing to our children. This is the same Lacey Evans who a couple of years ago appeared in an advert with her own proper real daughter for Foster Farms corn dogs, which clearly must grow on trees or out of the soil, the beautiful soil that makes up God's green earth, or whatever the hell people say. The New Day became NXT Tag Team Champions. Imagine saying that at the start of the year. You deserve your triple crowns and records broken. While PW Insider broke the news that Mercedes Varnado was heading to Wrestle Kingdom 17 and had travelled out to Japan in the middle of December. She did appear at Wrestle Kingdom, of course, and Kairi made a mess of her new finisher, which is a bit of a shame, really. Elsewhere, we were all worried that John Cena might see 2022 be the first year since 2001 that he wouldn't have wrestled a match for the WWE. So thank goodness old Cena Claus himself saw the bloodline worthy of a place on the naughty list, so John could team with KO to take down Sami and Roman on the last SmackDown of the year and keep the record alive. And of course, the noise on this one started in November, but we got confirmation in December as William Regal left AEW to rejoin WWE. He was only released by WWE on January the 5th of 2022 and only made his AEW debut at Revolution on March the 5th. The gentleman villain turned on Jon Moxley and cost the BCC the AEW World title at Full Gear, and then had the gall to record a promo that was in the past and that was kept away from the public for a couple of weeks, saying that him turning on Mox was his last lesson for the Combat Club. Always stay one step ahead, always have eyes in the back of your head. MJF then murdered Regal in the back of the head to write him off television on November the 30th, and in kayfabe sent him to the hospital, where I assume in AEW law he's going to reside for the rest of eternity. Regal, who initially requested his release back in October, is banned from appearing on television until at least 2024, as he's going back to see out his golden years in the business training his son Charlie Dempsey in NXT. NXT, by the way, who went back on their talent signing policy right at the end of the month when it was announced that actual no-name wrestler Dragon Lee was joining the Performance Center. The sad news this month peaked with the death of longtime Impact Wrestling announcer Don West at the age of 59. December the 13th, though, saw the news that Vince McMahon was reportedly intending to make a WWE comeback, once again according to the Wall Street Journal. According to the WSJ, VKM had told people he received bad advice from those close to him when he decided to step down in the summer. The same report claimed that Vince believed the whole scandal would have blown over had he remained with the company. This story came out as part of a report that outlined a fresh allegation at McMahon that involved a former Spa manager in 2011, while former referee Rita Chatterton came forward demanding $11.75 million in damages after she accused McMahon of serious indecent assault in a limousine back in 1986. WWE's stock price fell by 3.3% over the course of December the 13th, that day when Vince McMahon announced his plans to come back, dropping from $76.26 at the start of business to $73.73 when trading closed for the day. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but January the 6th, 2023, Vince McMahon officially came back in an active role in WWE. Vince McMahon acted by written consent to remove Joellen Lyons Dillon, Gillian R. Speed, and Alan M. Wexler from the board of directors. In their place, McMahon and former co-presidents George Barrios and Michelle Wilson were elected to the board. The Wall Street Journal also noted that McMahon is returning to pursue a sale of the company. Back on the 6th, the news was saying that if he wasn't installed as executive chairman of the board, McMahon planned to not support or approve any media rights deal or a sale. Vince wasn't initially installed as executive chairman, but he did change the bylaws, so he now had final approval of any sale or TV rights deal. Ignis Lahoud and Manjit Singh also resigned from the board of directors. Stephanie McMahon back then and Nick Khan remained as the co-CEOs, and Triple H was still in his role as chief content officer. Stephanie is also still, at this time I should say, WWE chairwoman. Then a report from CNBC claimed that WWE hired investment bank JP Morgan to help with a potential sale of the company, with PIF, the Public Investment Fund in Saudi Arabia, Comcast, Disney and Amazon among the front runners for a purchase. Some considered the Saudi deal to be done, but then others were saying nothing was confirmed and just hold your horses and all that kind of stuff. But at the time of this video coming out, we know that Vince is back, we know that Stephanie's resigned, we know there's a deal maybe going to happen. For all I know, by the time this video actually comes out and gets published on the channel, George Mizanin will be back with an army of penguins, and they'll have taken over the WWE and renamed it the WBF as we go back to the middle of the 90s when we're all high and horny as balls. Yes, goodness knows what the hell's happening with that, but what we do know what has happened so far in January of 2023, which hints that this year could be crazier than last year, which seemed utterly impossible, is that Mercedes Moné rocked up in New Japan and is set for the Battle in the Valley, where she and Kyrie could live like Jack and Sally if they want. WWE is coming back to the UK for Money in the Bank in July. The Great Muta said some things about Shinsuke Nakamura that I don't want to repeat because they were very naughty indeed. And Chris Jericho wrestled on PWG. So obviously this year is going to be more mental than last. Oh, and Adam Cole's back now. I guess that's crazy as well. Thank you for enduring this video. I've been Ross from Cultaholic Wrestling, and I'll see you soon.